Well, hello, everyone, and happy Earth Day. My name is Ryan Huff. I am the Communications Director for the Denver campus, and I will be moderating today's discussion. I want to thank you very much for joining us at this Supervisors Information Session. We appreciate you being here on short notice this week. We scheduled this for shortly after our Tuesday announcement because we know you are already receiving questions from your employees on returning to campus. We want you to have the latest information. A reminder that we will host another information session for faculty and staff next week. That'll be on Tuesday, April 27th at 2 p.m. And we would ask you to please highly encourage your employees to attend so they can get ready for returning this summer. Of course, if you would like to attend that session as well, please do so. We have a great panel assembled today, and I'd like to introduce them now. Chris Puckett is the Managing Associate University Counsel and Co-Chair of the Links Together Task Force. Pamela Jansma is the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, and she's also a co-chair for the Links Together Task Force. Elena Jones is the Interim Vice Provost and Senior Vice Chancellor of Student Success, and Doug Cassian is the Human Resources Director of Employee Performance and Development. In addition to our panelists who are on camera, we have a team behind the scenes who will be helping to answer your questions. And I'd like to thank Kelly Mason, the Assistant Director of University Events, Danielle Brunner, the Senior Budget Director, Lauren Gallery, the HR Director of the Business School, and Claire Hamilton, the Senior Ecom Specialist. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Chris and Pamela for some opening words.
Thank you very much for joining us today. I think Pam and I are both appreciative of your desire to join us and to learn what our Links Together task force has been working on, and introduce you to some of the areas that we know we have things to work on, some things that we don't have answers to, and how you all can help us move forward successfully. So I do want to thank all of you for doing your job, because as a supervisor, I know the last year has probably required you to do more than you'd ever thought you would have to do, and you have risen to the occasion. So I want to thank you very much for that. And I know that as we go into this next season of the Links Together Task Force, we're probably going to ask you to do more. And I acknowledge that is difficult to hear, but it is part of where we're headed in the future as we start to prepare to come back to campus. So with that, Pam, would you like to say a few words?
Sure. Welcome, everyone. And I echo everything Chris has said. There have been a lot of people working behind the scenes over the last several weeks. And I want everyone to know that safety, health, and well-being of the campus is our priority. So the safety and health and well-being of our staff, faculty, and students. And I think the key words here are flexibility and inclusivity in looking at what we're going to do. And I think we need to remember too that not all of us have flourished in this remote environment, and we need to think about the learning environment for our students. And so Links Together, we started a few weeks ago. We have 8 committees or working groups, including one for faculty return and one for staff return. We also have a space force, which is really pretty cool, we think. And then all these recommendations that we're making are coming from those groups. So there are a lot of people involved, and there's been a lot of input. So with the vaccines going well and the availability increasing, announced today were walk-up appointments at several sites. We thought that thinking about slowly returning with a long runway until classes start was the right thing to do. And we also know that information is changing daily. So this is what we know now. And so I guess I'll turn it back over to Chris.
I will just take a minute here to reference something that I think we just got notice is going to go out here in your email very soon. And we talked about wanting to do this at the top of our session so that we could continue on if possible. Wanted to have you understand, or have you know and learn that Dean Rebecca Cantor died this morning. And there's going to be an announcement of that momentarily, and some ways that our community can gather to remember Rebecca, or Dean Cantor, to support her family, hopefully, and to remember the incredible work that she has done here on campus. I think for many of you I think it's probably out of the blue. I think for most of us, it's out of the blue in many ways. It's been a very short, at least for most of us, very short knowledge of what she struggled with, literally a week. So that's where we are at the moment. So anyway, wanted to just be transparent about that. Recognize that for some of us, that's going to be difficult to continue to listen to this conversation, and just be aware for those of us, and Dean Jansma and I talked about it a little bit earlier too, this it doesn't seem real. And part of it's because we haven't seen each other face to face. And so. Getting back into links together, as Pam was saying, we do have a bunch of groups working on different areas. We welcome your participation. I think that we can even put in the chat box some other ways for you to get engaged and involved. Part of what you're going to see is in the next couple of weeks, there are going to be staff focus groups. There are going to be some faculty focus groups. There are going to be some different survey instruments that go out. And the goal for those is to help direct the task force and make sure that we're addressing the areas that we know are an issue, the areas that we know are of concern, and make sure that we're trying to move forward together in those spaces. I think that some of the things that I know that I wanted to at least mention off the top, and Pam's hit it already, which is safety. We all recognize that this is a difficult transition for all of us. I am in the office today. If you're wondering if the campus is here, it is still here. There aren't a lot of people around, but there are few. It is going to be different. And I'll tell you, it is different coming back in the office. It does take some work. So as supervisors, you all are going to be at the front lines of this. And for that, I'm very thankful and appreciative for all the work that you're going to do in this space. And part of what our goal is today is to talk through how we hope for that to happen, the kinds of tools we plan on providing you and that are already being created by Danielle and Lauren in the background. There's tools that are already coming together so that you can use those. The trainings that are upcoming, Doug Cassian is going to talk a little bit about that to help facilitate you in preparing your teams to come back to the workplace. There's going to be a template that Lauren and team are putting together that's going to help us understand about what the expectations are for coming back. So, and then there's going to be one of the things that I know Danielle and Lauren on our staff return team really wanted to focus on is how might we create welcoming environments to invite people back to campus. So part of that, making things welcoming once again. So as Ryan indicated, and as we said in the first set of emails, we are starting to talk about June 1st or the first week of June. We're not necessarily married to any of the dates, but for June to really be that month when people start to come back to the office. And that perhaps that's one day, perhaps that's 2 days, but that we start to put in place kind of what the steps are toward next normal. Part of your job as supervisors is going to be working with your deans, your associate vice chancellors, and your vice chancellors who you report to start developing return plans. And part of what Lauren and I mentioned earlier, Danielle are working on is this template to help you formulate what are the questions that we want to ask and how do we go about doing that. I think some of the things that may be a little different from last summer, we did a great job scaring everybody and getting everybody off campus moving really fast. We're not going to be able to do that right now. We're not going to be able to all of a sudden everybody come back because there's still a lot of things that still have to be worked out. I talked to our Space Force this week and I said, okay, you got to help me figure out what we're going to do with the elevator in Lawrence Street Center. What do we need to do here? There are going to be lots of questions about what is RTD doing. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. There are going to be lots of questions about, well, I've been really productive at home. Do I really have to come back to work? Those are the conversations that as supervisors, we're going to need you to start having with folks. And part of what you're going to hear too is that we do have a flexible workplace policy that's on the verge of being approved that does outline some things for us moving forward. Now, the bottom line though, is the expectation is this summer is going to be a period of transition, meaning most units are not going to be expected. I don't know of any so far that say by June 1, everybody's going to be back. Boom, we're all ready to go. The one exception I will say is student housing. Poor Elena and her student housing team, they've been on the ground since day one and they're still on the ground. And so they'll continue to be on the ground. But I think for the rest of us who are not quite in that space, this is going to be a slow process. And the goal is that by fall, you're in the next normal phase, okay? Whatever that means. And how do we get there? Well, we want to focus on, as Dean Jansma said, focus on students and our customers first. What are the services they need? How do we serve them? And from there, develop our scheduling, our presence on campus, the services we're going to provide, and how we plan on providing those. And you're going to hear a little bit about that. And as Dean Jansma said, we really do want to do this in an inclusive, equitable way that acknowledges and recognizes the different spaces we're coming to over the last year. One thing I do know that people have asked a lot of questions about has to do with air handling. You're going to see more about that in the near future. We are working with our Space Force team on putting together some transparent information to give and provide to our community. You also asked questions about AHAC. What's our deal with AHAC? Well, what is the deal with AHAC? But besides that, what we plan on doing, and frankly, we are doing, is working with them on creating a set of consistent plans, consistent priorities, consistent protocols. They're also working on developing some new information and different information about air exchanges and air quality in their buildings as well. And what I can say about that, I know there are people who get concerned that perhaps AHAC doesn't meet the standards of the University of Colorado. What I can tell you about that is that Michelle Marks is at the table, and Michelle Marks is our best advocate in holding them accountable and making sure that we get what we need to when we need to out of area. So I understand their concerns, but I think we're going to try and continue to be as transparent as we can about how those relationships work and what we can do. I think I wanted to just close real quick with a story, because this last weekend we did hold a vaccine equity campus on campus that Kelly Mason was amazing and pulled off and did a terrific job with. That was a partnership that we hosted, but there was a lot of members of our community and outside our community invited folks to. But what I want to tell you about is that what Kelly and I both experienced was the volunteering students, and how those volunteering students absolutely wanted to have connection with people. Didn't matter who we were, didn't matter. Actually, Norbert Chavez was there. Didn't matter if it was Norbert, didn't matter if it was me. They wanted contact. They wanted to know what it was like to be a college student. They wanted to act, talk about things. They so desperately wanted to engage with folks. And I think that's just a reminder to me that sometimes we need to recognize that even those of us who don't have frontline money creating, value creating jobs like myself, that we can have impact on folks. And that sometimes just having a friendly face in the hallway to point somebody and ask them, hey, do you need some help? Sometimes that's important. And that's going to be part of the story for the fall. And that's not to say that everyone's going to be here all the time, but I just say that because I think there are students who are desperate for that connection. And so I think part of our job is going to be to manage the safety, absolutely, but it's also to manage how do we provide support to those students and engage them and the students who aren't comfortable coming to campus. So it's going to be complicated. And that's why I want to admit this is a big lift. We're going to continue to ask for help. If there are things we can do as a committee or as a university to help support that, we want to know about that. We want to hear about those things to see if we can support. So anyway, with that, Ryan, I'll toss it back to you.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Chris. And a reminder for those listening in, please feel free to submit a question in the Q&A and we will do our best to answer those live. Some of you have submitted questions ahead of time and we will ask those to the panel as well. So let's just start out with this, Chris. So it's day one, it's June 1st or some point in June, and I'm getting ready to come back to the office. What do I need to know? What does day one look like as far as the bus I take, where I park, where I may sit, where I may eat lunch?
It's a lot of stuff, Brian. Did you really start
Yes.
with that question? I'll just say that to you.
Let's just start with getting to campus, and then we can go.
Getting to campus. Okay, well, thank you, Ryan. I think what I would say at this moment, where we sit today in our conversations with Denver Public Health, and I have, frankly, weekly conversations with them. We had 2 conversations with them this week. They are predicting that by June, sometime in June, all restrictions with just a few, mask wearing inside being one of the ones that's kept, that most restrictions are going to be gone. So having said that, between now and June, I think we're going to be in a bit of a flux. So I think we're going to see some things change. But I would say this is, I think there are a couple great things that I think our new CFO, Todd Haggerty, has put in place, and others, which is that we will have free parking for folks. We recognize that the summer is going to be a bit of a transition, especially when it comes to RTD. And so we are going to actually have free parking on our side of Spear underneath the CU Denver building and business school to help facilitate a transition. We are also working on, and Danielle and Lauren, I keep saying your names, but that's because they're at the center of this. They're working with RTD to put together some times when we'll have opportunity to give them feedback, but also to get more information from them about what their safety protocols are. I would say that I had a conversation with Denver Public Health this week where I reiterated that we really need to help get the mass transit stuff nailed down, meaning what are the expectations going to be? What's it going to look like? How are we going to operate? And so part of what's going to happen is you're going to either drive to work or you come to work. Are we going to have separate specific entrances? No, we're not going to do that. Are we going to necessarily have up elevators, down elevators, up staircases, down staircases? No, we're not. What we have learned in the last year is that the main important points are when you have close unmasked contact with somebody for 15 minutes or more, right? And so those kind of intermittent contacts are not the big issue. What's going to be continuing to be a question is how many of us get vaccinated. And somebody asked me this week, well, what's the best thing we can do? And I said, the best thing I can tell you to do is to number one, tell your story about why you decided to get vaccinated, and encourage everybody around you to get vaccinated, because that is going to be the way that we move forward. So is that enough of an answer for your question, Ryan?
Yes, I think so. Obviously there's a lot to be determined, as you mentioned. We know the rules today for the county, what they will be in 6 weeks. We will probably get more information as the weeks go on, so we'll be sure to pass that along. What about vaccines? Are vaccines mandatory, or may they be mandatory in the future?
I'll jump in on that one. The answer is maybe. At this point, I think there's continues to be lots of information that's known and unknown about the vaccine. I'd say we still don't know a lot. I think it's going to depend on what's happening around us. And I think I think I saw something recently that somebody says that, and Chancellor Marks hasn't said this, but another campus said this, that they said, well, it's likely we're going to require some kind of vaccination in the fall for our students. And so I'd say something similar, that I think that's probably the way the world is headed. And so I think that's likely the direction we're going to head. I think it's just a matter of when and how different pieces come together in that space.
Great. Thank you. And thank you to Kelly for posting in the chat where you can get a vaccination. We have free vaccinations right here on campus at the 5th Street Garage. We have a clinic going on Tuesday, and there are appointments still available. Ball Arena also, you can now just walk up or drive up to. You can also schedule appointments if you like, but plenty of opportunities to get vaccinated. I'll just skip around here a little bit. We already have a number of questions coming into the chat. And so Doug, I'll probably turn this one over to you. Is there a specific format for return plans or specific issues, topics that should be addressed in the return plans?
Yeah, there's a group of individuals that have identified the considerations to be given to returning, and certainly with an eye toward equity. And that is right now a fairly comprehensive list of items. So yes.
And we expect that hopefully to go live in the next week. I think Danielle and Lauren had agreed to. So our plan is to get that to you as soon as we can, so that supervisors and units can start developing those plans in accord with their vice chancellor, associate vice chancellors, and deans as well. Somebody asked a question, is there any official guidance on what schedules can look like going forward? Fully remote, minimum day schedules on campus, that kind of deal. What I would tell you is centrally, the answer is no, meaning we're not centrally, the chancellor isn't saying, I want everybody on campus X number of days, or I want this kind of response. What I will say is that the things that we are talking about and the deans and different other folks are talked about is how do we provide the services we need to the students we need to, and how do we do that? And so that is absolutely going to be the key and critical to it. Might certain units be justifying different kinds of situations? Absolutely. If somebody came to, I feel like Dora the Explorer, asking questions and answering my own. If, you know, is there a possibility that some units will say, look, we need everybody to be on campus at least so often? Maybe that might very well happen. But I think our goal is to really try to empower our units, our business units, to have those conversations, to talk about what works best for students.
So we have another question. This one,
I'm
go
sorry,
ahead.
that speaks a lot to the recently reviewed and approved alternative work schedules and remote work arrangements policy. So just to expound, some of those factors are, you know, the nature of the work performed by the employee, the impact on productivity individually and departmentally, ability to ensure coverage for functions without burdening other employees, ability to meet customer service needs and peak workloads, and certainly an ability for a supervisor to evaluate performance based on results or outcomes. So these are all kinds of factors that are taken into consideration for the decisions that will be made within the schools and colleges and departments.
Doug, a related question. You touched on this a little bit, but question in the chat: when will the new remote work policy be available, and when can we use this for the staff return for fall plans?
It's been approved. My understanding is that there'll be a kind of a two-tiered effective date for the campuses, with Denver looking at June 1.
Okay, very good. I'm going to turn this one over to Elena. Just a couple questions for you. The first one is, how should work units go about creating their plans for the quote unquote next normal?
Thanks, Ryan. So in addition to the planning tools that were referred to already, I really do encourage every unit to begin having these conversations. So what do those conversations look like? The first things for us to consider is the priority of safety and health for our community, to focus on the student-centered approach for the work that we do, to learn from the positive disruptions from the past year, and to commit to an equitable approach for implementing this. So what does that look like? My recommendation is that every unit starts this planning process by talking as a group about your unit's work, that you talk about it from the perspective of the groups that you engage, serve, and support, that you think through each of the services you provide, each of the activities that you perform, the groups that you support, the hours that best serve the needs of the groups you engage, and the modalities of engagement that work best for each area of responsibility within your unit. So as you can see, there's no way that we can be prescriptive about this, because each of our work is very, very different. So part of this discussion gives you the opportunity to consider the safety protocols that are in place. We know they're going to adapt and change as more and more of our population in the CU Denver community are immunized. So those safety protocols will become a part of your return plan, which means that your plan is going to adapt and change over time as these protocols change. So as you're working through each of these variables as a unit, a projected plan for operation should start to emerge through these discussions. And that plan should inform the hours of operation, the modalities for operation for the various unit activities, because we've learned in this past year, there's a lot of things that we've been able to do remotely or electronically that maybe actually work better than the ways that we had done them previously. So the intent is to integrate that going forward. So the next step would be to take that plan and work through a fair and equitable approach to staffing that operations plan. For some units, this process might be done primarily through group conversations. For other units, supervisors may need to have ongoing individual conversations with faculty and staff to talk about their specific constraints. So the intent is that you're having these conversations now, you're using the tools available to you from the Links Together team, you're building that plan, and we have a projected plan in place so that by June, we're starting to build our on-campus presence towards that operations and staffing plan that you've created for your unit. There's no question that we live in a time of uncertainty. So I really, really want to emphasize that this is a plan based upon current projections and the best information that we have available to us at this time. So I really encourage us to be prepared to observe how things are going, revise what isn't working, revise according to the latest protocols, safety protocols, respond to the feedback that we receive from our students about what's working for them and what's not, and that we all continue to adapt as the fall progresses.
Thank you, Elena. Another question for you. We've heard from many parents who say that childcare is really tough to come by this year, that the summer camps are not happening or maybe are full already. So a suggestion from one person who pre-submitted a question, will the Health and Wellness Center offer any day camps this summer?
Yeah, thanks for that question. You know, it's a really, really interesting idea that we are exploring, but I'm afraid today we don't have an answer on that yet. I think it is worth setting expectations that if we are able to do that, it's not going to be a replacement for full childcare for the summer, and it would likely require some form of payment. But all of this is in the process of being assessed and discussed. So more hopefully soon on that.
All right. This next question was in the chat, and I'll send this to Pam. For faculty and staff, how do we meet with students or parents in an office when generally those offices are too small to allow for social distancing?
Right. So that's a good question. And I think what will need to happen is we'll have to have some alternative spaces that are designated where people can meet as long as the social distancing requirements are still the same as they are now. We anticipate they may change. We don't know. We imagine that masking will still be with us for quite some time, but we shouldn't be meeting with people in areas where we cannot properly socially distance.
Thank you.
And can I jump in real quick, Ryan?
Please.
I think one thing, and I think Elena did a great job teeing up on it, and I think Pam did as well. So just so everybody understands, yes, this is June 1st, but let's say the world collapses tomorrow. Are we dead set on making it June 1st? Absolutely not. Meaning we are, along with you, continuing to pay attention to what the world is and the pandemic is doing. Part of the reason, and that's part of the reason you'll hear next week from Dean John Samet of the School of Public Health. And part of my expectation is to be surprised by him as to what he thinks about what's going to happen in the future. Having said that, I still think we still need to plan and prepare for coming back, because the day is coming. And we know that's the case because the vaccines work. And so I would just say we're not trying to rush into this. If things need to change, we need to pivot as an institution. We absolutely will. Having said that, I think our hope is, and what we've heard from Dean Samet and others, is that in June, we'll have a really good sense for where things are headed, in large part because of the increased numbers of people who have been vaccinated, the availability of the vaccine for our students, and then in what should be a significant decrease in the pandemic across the country. So anyway, that's just as an aside. I want to make sure folks understand we're not trying to, this isn't a black and white, and I've seen a number of questions. Well, do I have to be back on the 1st? No. What our goal is for the units, for your units, to have those conversations and to figure that out, to say, well, maybe one person does this day and the next person comes. There are any number of ways to address this. And there is no one size fits all that we are pushing for the summer centrally. Might there be deans and associate deans and vice chancellors who say, yeah, you know what, I want to see some things different, and here's how I want this to happen? Absolutely. But nobody that I have heard from is absolutely rigid on, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. I think the goal is really to recognize that this is going to take some time for all of us.
So getting to campus is always a hot topic with parking, and a couple questions in the chat. What happens if all of the free parking is already taken by the time we get into work? And then second parking question was, come fall, will the two underground parking areas revert back to assigned parking spots that you have to pay for? Anybody want to take that one?
Well, I was going to say, I think we're still not sure I'll just say this. We don't know what's going to happen quite yet with parking. I think this is a bit of an experiment still on the parking side. So I would say at least in June and July, that's the plan, and to see how that goes. And then from there, I mean, we really are going to have to continue to reevaluate. So I wish I had more news or different answer, but we don't know at this point.
All right.
Chris, I'd just like to say that, remember, it's not going to look like it looked in fall of 2019. We're not going to have everyone trying to get to campus in June and July in order to park, right? And there are not that many students either. So the free parking underneath the two buildings, I think there'll be more availability than we might think, just remembering back to before the times.
And I will say this one thing, and I think this goes to mentioning, and those of us who get these reports, see them all the time, on as far as class modalities goes, we are looking at, I think it's somewhere in the 50-ish, 55, 54% range of courses that are fully on campus, okay? As compared to in fall of 2019, I think 80% or close to that, 75% were fully on campus. So what does that mean? Well, we also have another 10 to 15% of courses that are hybrid. And those you all know that's still on campus, but it may be an intensive, it may be a different meeting patterns. So I would just say, I think what Pam is saying is exactly right. We are going to see a decrease in the number of people on campus this fall. I think no matter what, because what we've also seen is our online courses have gone up to 25%, a full 25% of our offerings are online. So even that means we're gonna be a little bit lighter on campus. Now, having said that, I think we're all hoping that students, continue to sign up and we see our enrollment continue to do what it needs to do. But this fall is going to be a bit different.
We have another transportation question. This person is glad to hear negotiations with RTD are continuing. Do these conversations include discussions about different EcoPass options, since not all employees and students will be coming to campus every single day? Is there some kind of option where EcoPass will work a certain number of days a week or a month, say?
I know that the conversations with RTD are ongoing and complicated. I think that's a great idea as far as more flexibility. I know for a fact that that's what CFO Todd Haggerty is working on, is getting that more flexibility, because part of what we did run into, and we have run into with RTD, is they want a guaranteed set amount of dollars and people paying in. And our goal is to try and come up with some level of flexibility. Exactly what that flexibility is going to look like, I don't know, because they're interestingly enough, they have a lot of things they have to do with the Department of Transportation federally before they can, it's all connected. And so suffice it to say, that's on the top of many people's priorities for the summer, to get you as much information as soon as we can.
Let me send this next one to Doug. This is also a childcare question. So for some employees who perhaps can get childcare for a full week, but can't get it, say, once or twice every week, can they say I want to work the second week of June and then I'll work remote for the rest of June?
We're open to possibilities. We need to take a look at this all on a case-by-case basis and kind of understand the factors that I identified earlier that are going to be in the policy. So, but I'm not going to rule it out. We want to try and be as understanding as possible regarding this, and understanding that childcare is still being and may still be impacted. So we really can't give a blanket yes or no on that, but not out of the realm of possibility.
All right, thank you. Elena, next question for you from in the Q&A. City Heights, will that be opening in full this fall?
It sure will. We're very excited about it.
Great. And about how many, tell us a little bit about how many beds and how many people do you expect in the City Heights?
Oh gosh, you're going to put me on the spot. I have to pull up my information.
So few hundred, certainly.
Yeah, I want to say 500. about 500 or so. But yeah, we've been actively reaching out to students, and it's designated to be our first year housing, and we're really excited about that opportunity for our students. And we've been marketing to students and parents and answering their questions. The housing team has done a truly amazing job. It's not easy to bring on a new dorm in any time, and obviously during COVID, it makes it even more difficult. So we already have several contracts lined up for students that are really excited to come to City Heights in the fall.
That's great. This next question is just a question on discretion. I know many supervisors would like to know, if I am a manager, say at the manager level, do I have discretion to create remote work policies or scheduling and such, or does that reside at the dean VC level? How will that work going forward?
Yeah, I'll take that. This is a process that would be initiated certainly by the supervisor, but a decision that ultimately rests within the dean at the school or college, or director VC, AVC of a department.
Great.
HR will not be involved in that process.
And Gabe has just chimed in 555 beds. So there you go on the City Heights answer. Thank you. All right. So we have some other questions in the chat here. Chris, I think you've addressed this already, but if you have anything else to say on this, can our department choose to work completely remote for the summer and just not take part in the soft return and come back in full for the fall, say?
What I would say to that is I think you really need to check with your dean if you're an academic department, and you need to check with your associate vice chancellor, executive director, or vice chancellor to talk through that. I don't think that anybody is necessarily saying thou shalt have to be on campus, but I do think that those folks at those levels may have some thoughts about how they want that to be handled, because centrally that's not something we're going to necessarily jump into and say thou shalt and you have to do X, Y, and Z. I think another question we've gotten is quite a few about tech and IT. We are still trying to figure out some of the federal funds and see if that might be available. I'm not sure it is for use for IT. I think the hope is, and this is, you may hear some other places, other campuses that say, oh, well, we want to talk about moving as fast as we can into the next normal. Well, I would say this for us. Our plan is to use the summer and even this next year, academic year, to kind of let things settle out a little bit, to find what that next normal is going to be. And that includes on the IT side, meaning on the tech side. So what does that mean? Well, if I were to say, for example, would I say outside of a few situations, you probably don't want to be buying towers. Laptops make a lot of sense these days. Having said that, is there going to be extra IT around or available? That's a great question. It's actually something we've started talking about. We haven't been able to start putting together lists, but that is a conversation that we did have with the deans this week, actually, where they were already starting to kind of put some ideas together around putting things together so that those resources could be available for folks to potentially have some of that hybrid flexibility. So what I would say is the fall going to be what the spring looks like? The answer is going to be no, it's not. Having said that, is the fall going to be kind of the next step into what things look like potentially longer term? I think absolutely. And I think what do our students want? What do we need from our workplace? What do we need from the university? How do we do our jobs more efficiently, effectively, better? I think all that stuff is going to start happening in the fall.
Elena, there was another question on City Heights. Will students in City Heights have vehicles, and is this going to create any additional parking issues?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as far as I understand, and I will double check this with our great housing team, but as far as I understand, there's no parking allocated to City Heights. So the plan is that they would not be bringing their vehicles. Now there may be a student that chooses to have a vehicle. And so let me look into that. I'm afraid I don't have the answer.
All right. Let's talk about RTD. We've talked a little bit about eco passes, but just in general, riding the bus. A lot of people have not been on a bus or a light rail for maybe a year or so and not familiar with how it works. What's your understanding on the safety for RTD and wearing masks and such?
RTD is going to, and from my understanding, and this is going to change every day, but RTD and the public health departments are still going to require mask wearing on all public transit. And that's probably going to be that way for a while. There's still a lot of speculation about how long that'll be. But I think there's a possibility it could be for a very long time. There's some discussion among some folks that becomes the new next normal, right? For riding on public transportation is just everybody wears masks. And frankly, I think the last time Elena and I were in Beijing, lots of folks there were wearing masks on public transit. And this was not in the middle of any kind of pandemic. And so I would suspect that that's going to continue. I know they continue to have increased cleaning protocols, and they also continue to have some distancing as well. I will say there's some questions about cleaning on campus as well. And I think there's been some really interesting studies about how the cleaning is less important. It's still important, but it's less important perhaps it was originally thought, because the way that the virus reacts. We're going to continue to have heightened cleaning opportunities, including much more capacity for individuals to clean their own spaces. We have a spot team that comes in and disinfects a space if we know that there are issues, if they've been positive cases. We're going to continue with that work. So I would just say I think there's continued to be more conversation in that space, but that's absolutely what we're planning on doing at the moment.
Let's talk about eating lunch. Obviously, people can go onto the 16th Street Mall or other places and eat lunch, but what if they bring their lunch from home? Where's a good place to eat it?
Pam, what do you think?
I do this all the time, even though people say not to do this, but I always eat lunch in my office. So, and if you're in your office and you can be socially distanced, you can eat your lunch in your office or just go outside.
And this may be one of those things that I think units, I wouldn't be surprised to see plans that not teams, but if there's a lot of folks in cubicles, for example, who can't necessarily do that, I would expect that, some of those return plans will have some information about that, where we might be able to set aside additional spaces for it, reserve those spaces. We're not sure. So I would say that's still yet to come if there are issues that need to be addressed in those spaces.
Open this one up to anyone. Is this question in the chat: is staffing presence expected to mirror that or be influenced by that of student presence on campus? So, for example, if there's 50% of normal classes, say, being offered, does that mean 50% staff presence?
No, that's not what we're. I mean, that's not the expectation, right? I really do think, and I'll say it again. I think you've heard us say this a couple times. We really do want to focus on the service, right? And what is it that students need? It may be that students have realized over the last year that they care less about in-person and they care more about flexibility between the hours of 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. at night and hours on the weekend, right? And they want that access remote. If that's the case, then that's the case, right? Now, having said that, is it possible that we have 50% on campus and 80% of people on campus? Sure, I don't know. But I think the goal really is to focus on what it is that you need to be doing and how it is we can do that effectively and really serve our customers. And I know many of us, myself included, serve customers who are not just students. And so we need to acknowledge that and figure out how that's changed, right, even in the last year. I would say this: I think there are definitely, I've heard this from different deans that they think they'll probably never have a full in-person staff meeting again, our faculty meeting, because there's so many people, and sometimes having everybody on the screen actually works better. So I would just say these are the positive disruptions that we hope to be able to continue and think about in new and different ways, so that we do take advantage of what works in this space, but also recognize that where we're headed.
Let me ask a faculty question, probably best for you, Pam. For faculty, will this summer look much different than other summers?
Yes and no. A lot of faculty have 9-month contracts, right? So a lot of faculty aren't around in the summer anyway, unless they're doing their research on campus or they're teaching. So in that sense, it might look like any other summer because the faculty member isn't there. But for faculty who are going to be on campus, they're expected to follow the same protocols that we have to do in terms of COVID right now.
Thank you. And
Question?
yes, thank you. I have a student-related question, so perhaps Pam or Lena on this one. For students who want to attend remotely and not attend an in-person class, is the university providing tech support for this possibility?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. We're having discussions about that. The ideal would be if we had the perfect technology in every single classroom that would allow for that for every single class. The reality is that we don't, and we're trying to inventory and figure out what to do. There will be live streaming or remote options for some classes. In the case of CLAS, where we have classes that have multiple sections, then we have sections that have different modalities to help that. But the message is going to be flexibility on the part of faculty with students, flexibility for students and the attendance policy, and that there will be alternatives available if students don't feel like they can come to campus, if they don't feel safe for a specific class period.
All right. Thank you. Question on attestation. For those of us who have been to campus recently, we take our temperature in the morning, we fill out the form on the computer, and if we're healthy, we get the green light and then go get a wristband when we come to campus. Will that process continue in the summer, and what do you anticipate for the fall?
That's a really great question. And I saw somebody asking questions about check-in sites and all the rest of it. That's a really good question. And then percentage of faculty staff vaccinated. Ooh, that's a good one. So, at the moment, it's a little known fact, we're actually under a public health order that requires us to continue with the daily health attestations. And I had a conversation with Denver Public Health yesterday about when they plan on lifting that. Our plan, I'll just tell you this, is through the end of the semester to not change what we're doing. So I don't think we're going to change daily health attestations or the check-in process before the end of the semester. However, I anticipate that by the summer, we will have modified fully our daily attestation and check-in process, where you won't be required to check in. There still may be an online app component, but as far as checking in folks in the ways we do it now, that's going to cease by the summer. We are going to continue to hire those students because those students are terrific and they love working on campus and they've become a great team. We're going to continue to use them as ambassadors on campus to be enforcement light in some ways, but also to help everyone understand what the expectations are and be welcoming and invite folks on campus. So I would say you're going to see a lot of the same friendly faces, potentially doing different roles in the future. But that's kind of where we're headed. I would say at the moment, end of the semester, those things are going to go away. By the summer, we'll have changed what we're going to do, and we'll let you know. Questions about percentages of faculty and staff who are being vaccinated. We're actually working right now as we speak to get a comparison of who is in our system and how we might be able to figure out how and when they were vaccinated. We aren't going to be able to get details of any individual, which is not appropriate. Having said that, what we can do is start to get information from the state about percentages. And so we are very hopeful that even this month, potentially April here, we might get our first snapshot, our first glimpse into what we think the percentages are. So for example, it might come back with, let's say 55%, which is the city rate right now for across students, staff, and faculty. Or it may split it down into students and faculty and staff. So we're still in the process of trying to get that information from the state. And as well as we talked about earlier, there are lots of questions about if we move that direction, how might we, if we require the vaccine, how might we track that? How might we handle that? You know what? There's a lot of conversations, a lot of plans, but nothing that's been finalized, nothing that's been decided. Obviously, there are lots of different ways that folks can talk about doing that. If we ended up going that direction, I could just tell you we're going to be talking lots and lots and lots about that topic between now and the fall.
Lena, I understand you have some more information on the City Heights parking.
I do. Thank you so much to Melanie Rudolph Crawford, who sent me the information that for City Heights, students that have a car will be able to get a permit at Links Crossing where there is a gated lot. Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you. Let's stick with you, Elena. Question on group fitness classes. Will they be back for the fall? And will masks be required at that point?
That's a good question about the masks. It all depends upon what the latest public health guidelines are. Group fitness classes, as far as I know, will be back in accordance with the public health guidelines. So social distancing and masking. And as the public health guidelines change, then the requirements of the fitness classes will change accordingly.
The next question, I'm sure we all hope everybody is on their honor system and doing the right thing. But the question here is, if an employee passes attestation and then comes into the office and they're sick, what can we do about it? Or, any disciplinary actions or anything like that?
Doug, you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I don't know about a disciplinary action right away, but the first issue would be to kind of send them home. And if they're exhibiting significant symptoms, I would, ask for a fitness, some kind of a note from a doctor, or some kind of attestation from an MD or medical provider to say, is this employee fit for the workplace? And then we'll have to deal with any kind of, discussion regarding directives, expectations, letters.
All right, thank you. This is great. We've had almost 50 questions asked here so far, and definitely enjoy all the interaction, and we'll certainly work to get you more answers. At the next session on Tuesday, we'll have Dr. Samet, who's the Dean of the Colorado School of Public Health. And certainly if you have any medical questions, that would be a great time to ask him that as well. We have about 5 or so minutes left. I was just wanted to go around the room if there are any closing thoughts from each of you, or anything you want to address that we didn't ask just yet.
Doug, do you mind? There's a question in there about leave.
Yeah, I see that about the.
Yeah, and we've gotten a lot of questions.
Vaccinated and you still, contract the virus. Currently the public health emergency leave, part of the Healthy Families and Workplaces Act, piece of Colorado legislation, makes allowance for leave under those circumstances. People would be using their sick leave primarily. And it's all based on one's balance as of January 1. So depending on your balance as of that date, you may be eligible for university provided leave, or you might have to use your own sick leave balance.
All right, well, let's go around the room for any closing thoughts or anything else you want to address. And who would like to start?
I'll start. I'll be done. I want to thank you once again. In all sincerity, this has been, and I almost used the S word for those of you who know me well, this has been an awful, no good, terrible, tragic year. And I look forward to seeing you all, frankly. I saw a few folks today. And it is different. It is different. But I think I get encouraged when I see other people. It's been far too long, frankly, to see many of you. So I am very encouraged that we'll have that opportunity. I am going to continue to ask anybody and everybody to get the shot, get the vaccine, get the vaccine, get the vaccine. If you can't find someplace to get it, call me or Kelly Mason. We will walk you to the place to get it and make sure you get it. There's lots of ways to get it. If you dial 211, you can get a free ride to go get it. So make sure we have that information for our students, because that's how we're going to get back. So thanks everybody for your hard work.
A reminder, earlier in the chat, Kelly posted a website both for our 5th Street Garage as well as Ball Arena, where you can get the vaccinations. Pam, what are your closing thoughts?
Well, they're the same as Chris's. It'll be really nice to see people again. Dean Teskey forwarded to the deans yesterday an article in the New York Times that talked about the mental state of languishing, which is not flourishing and it's not being depressed either. We're just languishing, and it would just be great to see people. That said, everyone is anxious. Most people are anxious, and we have to approach this in a very empathetic way to make sure that everyone is comfortable enough in returning and we manage it well, and we have our university back. And I think we need to understand too that our students have been impacted tremendously, and many of them really want to come back and to experience college. We have a whole year of students that haven't had that experience. And so I think we need to keep that in the back of our heads. So thank you for everything. And as was said earlier, it's going to be a heavy lift, but we'll get through it.
Thank you. Elena.
Thank you. I echo everything that Chris and Pam have just said. I really want to give a specific thank you to all of you as supervisors. I know for myself, as a leader, as a manager, as a supervisor, this has been one of the hardest years of my career. And I know that many of you are feeling the same way. And we have been stretched, and we have learned so much, and we have been supporting each other, and we've been giving grace to each other. And it hasn't been easy, and I recognize that. And I am so grateful for all of the leadership that you provide in this amazing university. We couldn't do it without you. And so as you are having these conversations that I talked about with your teams, I really encourage you to start those conversations if you haven't already. Really talk things through, really build this plan together if possible, if that works for you and your team. If it doesn't, then that's your discretion as a supervisor. But if you get stuck, if you feel like you're just running into a spot where you can't resolve the issue or you don't know what the right path is, please look to your leadership. Please reach out to any of us on this panel. We are here to support you. And like Pam said, we will get through this together.
And you mentioned we actually have a very specific resource that's going to be available from now until the end of May. Joyce Joranson, who is somebody that many of you know, helped us out in some issues in the business school, or helped move through some things in the business school. She is going to be available. She's a longtime human resources person. She's going to be available for individual and small group appointments and larger group. Frankly, we've talked about bringing her in to talk to the deans as well, as to how do we go about implementing some of what we're talking about. So we are going to try and we'll have her probably in one of our following town hall group talks, whatever they are here, so that you get to know who she is, but she'll be available as well.
Thank you. Doug, final thoughts?
Yeah, wow, what's left to say? I would, of course, I totally agree with everything that's been said. I know that the future here is looking promising, but certainly it's fraught with uncertainty. Your leadership team at the university is here to help with those challenges. I look forward to working with you all and moving into a more comfortable space at some point, hopefully in the next year.
Great. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists, both the ones on camera and everyone behind the scenes who's answering questions. And also want to remind you that the next information session for all faculty and staff will be Tuesday, April 27th at 2 o'clock. Thank you very much for joining us.